So, what happens if you give some of the world's smartest AIs a bunch of money and just tell them to build a company from scratch? Well, a pretty wild experiment called the Vortex Challenge did exactly that. And let me tell you, the results showed this massive, shocking split between pure genius and just total collapse.
I mean, think about it for a second. Could an AI really run a company? We're not just talking about crunching numbers here. We're talking about it acting like a real CEO, making those tough, day-to-day strategic calls you need to make to build something from absolutely nothing. And that is the big question this whole experiment was trying to figure out.
So here was the setup, plain and simple. They took 11 of the most powerful AI models on the planet. Each one got a starting pot of $5 million and a one-year timeline. The mission? Build a startup. The goal was straightforward, but the challenge, as you'll see, was immense.
Okay, so welcome to the Vortex simulation. This was the arena. Picture this. Each AI is basically the CEO of a brand new manufacturing startup. And every single day, it had to make a real choice. Do we hire more people? Build a new factory? Should we invest in R&D? Or maybe try to win this new contract? Or do we just sit tight and do nothing? And the best part? Success wasn't about some complicated business metric. Nope, it was simple. Whoever ends the year with the most cash in the bank wins. That's it. Now, you might expect, a pretty wide range of results. Some AIs do okay, some fail, some do great. But what actually happened was so much more extreme than that. The final results tell this incredible story of two totally different outcomes. And the results? Wow. They weren't just a little different from each other. They were complete polar opposites. You had the winners, like Claude Opus and GPT 5.4, ending up with over $500 million each. And then you had the losers at the bottom, models like GLM-5, which went totally bankrupt in just 39 days. We're talking about a performance gap of more than $500 million between the AIs that figured it out and the ones that just completely crashed and burned. I mean, just look at this gap. It is absolutely staggering. At one end of the spectrum, you've got Claude Opus, sitting on a $516 million fortune. Then somewhere in the middle, you have a model like Grok, which, yeah, it survived the year, but it barely made any money. And then at the other extreme, you have GLM-5, which not only failed, but actually finished over $1 million in debt. They all started with the same money, same rules, but ended up in completely different universes.
So what was the secret sauce? What separated the absolute titans from the total failures? Well, it all boiled down to one thing: strategy. So let's dig into how the top AIs played the game, because it turns out there was more than one way to come out on top.
The winners basically developed two very different personalities. On one hand, you had GPT 5.4, which was the total daredevil. It went all in on a high-risk, high-reward strategy. And on the other hand, you had Claude Opus, who was more like the patient chess master, playing a slow, steady game that led to a massive explosion of growth at the end.
Now, to really get GPT 5.4's risky approach, you have to look at this number. On day 226, after just burning through cash, its entire $5 million starting fund had shrunk to just $869,000. It was right on the edge of going bust.
See, GPT 5.4 bet the entire farm on building up its manufacturing capacity right at the beginning. It was a huge, huge gamble that almost bankrupted the company. But just as it was about to hit rock bottom, those big contracts it had positioned itself for started rolling in, and its fortunes just completely flipped, catapulting it all the way to a final score of $513 million. Incredible.
And then there was Claude Sonnet. This one was the early mover. By day 185, about halfway through, it had already racked up $169 million. At that point, the other top AIs were still struggling below 20 million. It just found a way to become profitable faster than anybody else, even though some of the others did manage to catch up later.
All right, so we've seen the smart risks and the patient strategies of the winners. Now let's dive into the rest of the pack, where the decision-making was, well, let's just say it was a lot more chaotic and a lot less successful.
Okay, take the story of Llama 4 Maverick. Its performance wasn't so much strategic as it was just random. After getting itself nearly $50 million into debt, it was saved by a single, massive, last-minute contract. As one of the researchers perfectly put it, that's not strategy, that's a model that got lucky. Now, contrast Llama's wild roller coaster ride with Grok, which was on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. This thing was so incredibly cautious that for the first 23 days of the simulation, it did absolutely nothing. Its cash balance didn't budge. Now, that extreme caution did keep it from failing, but it also kept it from really succeeding. It barely managed to double its money over an entire year.
And then there's this really fascinating case, DeepSeek. The researchers called its strategy passive failure. Get this, it actually survived the full 365 days. But the whole time, it was just slowly bleeding cash, and it finished with a negative balance. When they looked into it, the diagnosis was kind of strange. See, every individual decision it made seemed, well, reasonable. But they just never connected. They never built on each other to create any momentum. So it didn't crash spectacularly, it just kind of drifted into failure.
So you might be thinking, this is a cool simulation, but why does it actually matter? Well, because this isn't just a game. This is a direct test of the kind of AI agents that people are already starting to use to manage their real-world lives and businesses.
And the stakes are seriously high. Remember this number, 39 days. That's how long 3 different, very advanced models lasted before they just completely fell apart. And the fact that they all failed on the exact same day, that strongly suggests they hit some kind of complexity wall that they just couldn't think their way through.
What these results really give us are clear patterns of how AIs can fail. You've got reckless aggression, just burning cash on terrible bets. You've got coherence collapse, which is where the AI's logic just completely breaks down. That's probably what happened on day 39. And then you have passive inaction, that slow, quiet drift into failure that we saw with DeepSeek.
And here's the kicker, the really crucial point. These AI models are the engines behind the tools that are promising to run our lives, our schedules, our travel, even our money. The researchers really nailed it when they said, if a model can't even maintain a coherent strategy in a simulation, should you really be trusting it with your email, your calendar, or your finances? And let's be really clear here. This was not an IQ test for AI. It was a test of something far more practical, especially for autonomous agents. It was about their ability to make a sequence of connected decisions where every single choice has real, downstream consequences. In other words, it wasn't about how smart the AI is on paper, but how capable it is of actually doing things effectively in the world.
So that kind of brings us to the big final question, right? This simulation has shown us all these different AI personalities. You've got the high-risk daredevils, the super patient strategists, the totally chaotic gamblers, and even the ones that just sit there. So if you were going to hand over the keys to run part of your life or your business to an AI agent, what kind of boss would you choose?